When you hear about a barn find or a garage find or a long lost significant car kind of coming back into public light, that mental image is cobwebs and dust in some really cool car that somebody finds, pays very little for, spends millions of dollars on, and turns it into a multi-million-dollar car and takes it to Pebble Beach. And obviously that's not my approach to car buying, but I do love to find a car in terrible shape that there aren't many other people bidding on, that I might be able to find a way to afford a car that otherwise I wouldn't have a chance at it. And I hopefully don't have to spend all that much money, not to make it perfect, but just to make it okay. I've talked a lot about the fact that the margin between unacceptable and okay can be profitable. Okay to good might be break even, and good to perfect is where you start to lose money. But I know that the only hope that I've got to buy some of my favorite cars is to find them in terrible shape. That's why I talk about always looking for the worst examples of the coolest cars on earth. And that means I've always got kind of a list of cars that I'm searching for that I think might exist, or I've got some casual or quiet leads on, or some idea of where the car might actually be. And one of the cars that I've always hoped that I might be able to find is a 1998 Lamborghini Diablo SV with one of the most extraordinary backstories and original sales stories that a car could possibly have. Now, a couple of years ago, I did buy another Diablo SV, a 1997 VIN car out of Japan with the help of Matthew Ivanhoe, the cultivated collector. We were able to uncover this car, buy it in one of the like Japanese arcade auctions, and it came in totally unknown, very modified, previously kind of a Yakuza Japanese gangster car with rhinestones everywhere and stickers all over it and wires for televisions, and it was wonderful. I still have the car now. We originally wrapped it kind of a bright green, and then it was on Tex-Mex Motors, Rob Pitt show, and they painted it orange, kind of, and so I adore the car. It is so rough, but it is so perfect, and mechanically, it's very sorted out because last year, Cameron Davis and the team at DC Motorworks totally went through the car. But really, for the past 5 years, long before I was able to acquire that car, I have been looking for this car because this 1998 Diablo SV was sold out of the 1998 Victoria's Secret Christmas Dreams and Fantasies catalog. Now, in 1998, I was 13 years old, which I think is the exact target of people who are going to the mailbox every day wondering if the new Victoria's Secret catalog came in. And to be honest, I didn't grow up loving cars. And so at that point, I was very familiar with the idea that there were these really cool cars that were very expensive, and I had no idea how someone would ever afford one, much less have the ability to buy one out of a lingerie catalog. But this car was actually sold alongside other like fantasy gifts, like a $5 million bra covered in rubies and diamonds and things like that. And so this is something that always stuck out in my mind as one of the early times that I was kind of exposed to the idea of what Lamborghini buyers must be like. The car had sold for an astronomical original price because at the time, the MSRP of a Diablo SV was probably about $230. A Roadster was a little more, maybe $280. This car was $350,000 in the Victoria's Secret catalog. And I mean, that would have made it the most expensive car ever sold by the Lamborghini brand at that point, which is a pretty wild idea. Clearly they've gone up and now a Revuelto's over $700,000. But I mean, that was an insane amount of money back in 1998. Now the car was described as either white or pearl white, depending on where you read about it, and they had inverted the graphics in chrome from SV for Sport Veloce to VS for Victoria's Secret. It had special luggage and supposedly a special phone, and I think they were going to make maybe like 5 or 6 of these cars if there was a huge response to the publication and offering, but in fact they only made one. Now, in 1998, that was the first model year of the Diablo SV, which meant Sport Veloce back then rather than Super Veloce as it did on the Murcielago and on to the Aventador, but almost all of the 98 cars were Monterey Edition cars, and so even when they did the running of the bulls of Mario Andretti and stuff like that, the cars actually showed up and were initially delivered with the 3-piece OZ black center wheels and the SV graphic on them, but eventually they were changed to these chrome Kinesis wheels, and that's what this car had on it brand new. They were chrome to kind of match that graphic. Some of the other SVs also had chrome graphics, which was really like a cutting-edge vinyl technology back in 1998. I looked into it, and apparently they were only really set up for like signage and like window graphics and stuff like that, but they had chrome graphics. This car had a body color wing, but it did not have the rockers with the strakes inside, like a Roadster would have had, or like a Monterey Edition car would have had. And so a really, really unique one-of-one spec, but the car had very little information that ever kind of became connected to it in terms of its history over time. There was nothing in the VINwiki app, nearly nothing on Carfax, apart from one very encouraging entry back in 2006. The car had been crashed in Colorado and totaled, so it had a salvage title. So that meant that unlike a lot of cars that many people are hopeful we might come upon one day and be able to bring back to life, that simple idea that it was crashed and rebuilt would like rule out John Tamarian from Curated and a lot of other collectors that might not be willing to own a car that would have a branded title. But I have plenty of salvage cars. I will have many more. That did not deter me one little bit. And so I thought this is the perfect one, because even if other people find it, the first person they're going to call is me. But, it's one of these things that you don't have any real leads, because after, I think, 2011, there were no other entries into Carfax about this car. So whoever had it inevitably either had destroyed it even further, sent the car overseas, had done something other than register the car, drive it, maintain it, and go to shops that have a Carfax subscription or integration that would allow us through Experience and AutoCheck and Carfax and hopefully VINwiki at some point, the ability to know what happened to this car. Nobody was taking it to car shows. No one knew. And so a couple of years ago, I actually said, look, we know that the car was in Colorado at one point. No new titles have been issued since then. I'm going to hire a Colorado-based private investigator and see what they can dig up, because they've got abilities to dig into DMV systems and stuff like that. And within just a few hours, he came back with a couple of different names, a couple of addresses, a couple of phone numbers, an email address, and things like that. And I just go to work saying, hey, I believe you might have a car that I'm interested in. Do you happen to own a 1998 Lamborghini Diablo SV? And I get almost no response except from one of the multiple phone numbers. And it wasn't the guy who owned the car, unfortunately, but it was someone who knew something about it, because this was a former business partner, a now estranged business partner of the person who had described to him a time when he had crashed a Lamborghini. Now, he had never seen this Lamborghini. He had not been in recent contact with this guy who he said owed him a lot of money. And he said, I was unlikely to be able to find him, but of course I continued to text through the other numbers. And he did validate that one of the other numbers that I had was possibly, or at least previously, his number. And so I'm texting him periodically, and one day I did get a response from it. I'd been telling him every few days, like, hey, I'm looking for this car, this VIN, do you happen to own it, or do you happen to know where it is? Nothing. But one day he came back and said, yes, but I am driving. And of course, I'm like, that's perfectly fine, be safe, but please, when you have a chance, I'd love to speak with you further about the car. Nothing. 24 hours later, nothing. I text him again a week later, nothing. A month later, nothing. I never hear from this person again. And so, whenever you're in search of one of these kind of cars, it kind of goes in surges of like, we were almost there, and then no, we're not there. And then we're almost there, and then we're almost. And the same thing with the El Chapo McLaren F1. I'll get a lead, I think we're going to do something, and then it just fizzles out because there's no real proof of where the car is today. But about a month ago, I met a guy named Tim Fabrizio, and this happened because I started to be tagged. Probably literally 1,000 times on posts that he had made on Facebook talking about owning Nicki Minaj's Bentley. And for the same reason that this Victoria's Secret underpants catalog Lamborghini Diablo is interesting, I love cars with a prior celebrity attachment. It's the kind of provenance that I think is, the new racing history, to be honest. And it's not the same thing, clearly, but in the world of supercars, especially Italian supercars, we're not in the era of 250 GTOs with racing pedigrees. These are times where these cars were owned in a really, really interesting and really strange ways. The same way the Paris Hilton Mercedes McLaren SLR was more special because of that unbelievable picture of Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, and Paris Hilton in this car all that many years ago. And so that kind of enriched my ownership of the car. My wife loved the SLR, and all of her friends, whenever they were over here, they'd be like, can we get in the car and try to put our faces the right way and take that picture? Of course, it was something that was really, really fun. And when I had mentioned it over the years, like, one day I'm going to find that Victoria's Secret car, she thought, that's pretty weird. Why not? That's a pretty cool thing to have. I had her approval, whatever that's worth, to go and continue to search for this car. So Tim came here talking about his Nicki Minaj Bentley and starts talking about other cars that he's dug up and finding stolen cars. And he was a really good kind of private investigator and detective as it pertained to finding missing cars. And he had seen some of our bounty hunt videos from over the years that we had done on VINwiki, and he said, are there any cars you're looking for right now? And I had the list pulled up, and I said, hey, these are the ones, but I really, really want to find that Victoria's Secret car. And he had various ways to, get into government databases and talk to cops and things like that, and he honestly came up with just about nothing. But a few weeks later, he said, Ed, I have a lead. And he had found through some obscure search platform a 2011 social media post that had a picture of this car, and it was by a young girl, but she had described it in the post as a relative's Lamborghini, or their new car. And it was around the time that we knew that the car had been offered through the Mecum, Indianapolis auction. And so we knew that they had tried to sell the car. We didn't know if it had actually sold, if that sale had gone through, or what happened, because the title, as we could tell through Carfax, had never processed. But he was looking geographically in that area, and it was a post from a person in Illinois. So all he had was a last name and generally an area. So he goes to work looking at property records, other vehicle registrations, and finds a person that matches that last name that's got like 50 cars and maybe another 50 motorcycles, and owns either an airport or an airplane hangar in central Illinois. So amazing. I mean, this is the best lead we've had since the car went missing 14 years ago. And so he's like, there's different ways that I kind of like to approach this, but honestly, he just wanted to go knock on their door. And I said, okay. I mean, I was traveling for the last like 6-7 weeks, and so I was not able to join him, or I would have been happy to do so standing far behind him as he opens that door. But he said that's what he wanted to do. So he had a trip planned in Florida, and then he was going to drive up to a very small town in central Illinois, about an hour and a half south of Chicago, and was going to try to get them to sell this car. Now, he had a phone number, he had some email addresses and things like that, but he's like, I think showing up in person is our best bet. So he drives up to Illinois. He always drives. He doesn't like flying. I cannot fault him for that logic. And he gets into town, and he takes a bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates to the front door and knocks. No one answers, but he leaves it there with a note that says, I'm looking for a car, and I believe you have it. He doesn't say which car it is. And so he just starts wandering around this town for the day, and he gets no phone call. He's left his phone number, and he gets no response from the people that we believe might have this car. But he starts going to local bars and things like that, and everyone says there is no chance that there is a Lamborghini in this town. There's not even a chance that there's a big car collection in town. Like, this is just not the kind of place where that sort of thing might happen. And so he's getting a little bit discouraged, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. And he ends up talking to more people who recognize the last name of the person we suspected might own this car. And they said, in a, maybe a less delicate way, that these were a different kind of angels, not the Victoria's Secret angels surrounding the car when it first went to market. This different kind of angels were of the motorcycle enthusiast variety. And, that's not exactly the kind of thing that you want to hear going into a negotiation over buying something that they might have. And so I don't know if that is true, but they did have a bunch of motorcycles. And so he's just kind of wandering around, taking pictures around town and things like that, just waiting, hoping that his phone might ring. And I am getting in bed that night, and he calls me. So I pick up the phone. I'm talking kind of quiet, trying not to wake my wife up. And he says, Ed, I found it. They told me they have it. They know what it is. They want a lot of money for it, but they're going to let me go see it in the morning. And I was speechless. I said, really? He said, yep, I believe it's really the car. It matches everything that we've talked about. He said it's been up on a lift apparently since they bought it. They were doing some things to it, but they are open to selling it. I know you're not going to like the number, but I'm going to go see it anyway, and I'll let you know what I find out. If you get a ticket, the first thing you should do is text a picture of it to 305-305. That will get the ticket clinic on your case immediately. You'll be facing costly fines, risks of suspension, possible jail time, points on your license, higher insurance premiums, and a lot of bad things that they can help you to avoid. You can also find them at the link in the description below, but the Ticket Clinic is a nationwide law firm with brick and mortar offices in Georgia, Florida, and California, but they've got attorneys everywhere, and that's what's most important, because a local attorney will know exactly how the local laws work, know the people who are in charge, and get you the best outcome possible. So text a picture of your ticket to 305-305 or click the link in the description below to fight your ticket with the Ticket Clinic.